I used to think I just needed to earn more. More money, more options, more freedom. It took me an embarrassingly long time to realize the problem was never the income. It was what I was doing in the silence between paychecks. Two people, same city, same salary, same Friday afternoon. One of them is quietly becoming wealthy. The other has no idea anything is wrong. Nobody can see the difference. Not yet. And here's the part that took researchers decades to fully accept. The difference isn't being created by anything dramatic, no perfect investment, no genius decision, no single moment either of them could point to and say, that's where it changed. It's being created in the space between decisions, in habits so quiet, so completely unremarkable in the moment that most people either practice them accidentally or miss them entirely and never know what they lost. This is about those 5 habits, what they actually are, why they're invisible, and why that invisibility is precisely the mechanism that makes them work. Before the habits, there's something worth understanding about why we miss them in the first place. Human beings are genuinely terrible at noticing gradual change, not because we're careless, because we're wired for sudden threats, sharp movements, dramatic shifts. The slow ones slide past us completely. It's the same reason you don't feel yourself aging day by day, but look at a photograph from 10 years ago and feel it all at once, a quiet shock. The accumulation made suddenly visible. Financial behavior works exactly the same way. You remember the moment you bought the car. You don't remember the 100 small decisions that made the down payment stretch. You feel the raise arrive. You don't feel the lifestyle expanding silently to consume it. And somewhere in the background, invisible and patient, the consequences of both patterns are compounding. Not just money compounding, behavior compounding. Every habit you build or fail to build is accumulating interest right now, quietly, without announcement. The direction it compounds is the only question that really matters. The first silent habit is engineering your environment against yourself. Not motivation, not discipline, environment. Here's a scene that plays out millions of times every month. Someone receives their paycheck. They intend to save, genuinely, sincerely intend to save. But the money sits in the account and life is expensive, and somehow by the end of the month, there's less left than expected. Again. And they feel a specific kind of frustration that isn't quite anger and isn't quite shame, just the quiet deflation of having meant to do something and finding it didn't happen. Again. This isn't a character failure, it's a design failure, and the distinction matters enormously. Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize in economics for his work in behavioral science, spent years studying exactly this pattern. What he found was both simple and quietly radical. When saving was automatic, when the decision was made once, in advance, and then completely removed from daily conscious choice, people saved 3 to 4 times more over their lifetimes. Not because they became more disciplined, because they stopped needing discipline at all. Willpower is exhaustible. It depletes with every decision across a long day. By the time most people reach the end of a difficult week, their financial decision-making is running on almost nothing. They know this on some level, they feel it, but they keep designing their financial lives as though discipline will always be available when they need it. Systems don't get tired. The silent habit isn't saving money, it's building the architecture where savings simply happens, where friction sits between you and spending, not between you and the future you're trying to build. Small, deliberate, nearly invisible. And what's strange about automating savings for the first time is how it feels. It feels of nothing. No triumph, no sacrifice, just a quiet administrative adjustment. That nothingness is exactly the point. The second silent habit is asking one question before every purchase. Not can I afford this? Almost anyone can afford almost anything once. That's never been the right question.
The right question is, will I own something after this? Pause on that for a second, because this is the one that's hardest to sit with honestly. Think about the last time you looked at a bank statement and genuinely couldn't account for where it went. Not one big thing, just gone, dispersed into a month of decisions that each felt reasonable in the moment. That feeling, that specific low-grade bewilderment, is what happens when spending consistently evaporates instead of accumulates. Every dollar is making a choice on your behalf between two futures. In one, the dollar becomes something, a fraction of an asset, a position in a business, something that generates more over time. In the other, the dollar becomes an experience, a convenience, a moment, and then disappears completely, leaving nothing behind except the memory of having spent it. And here's where the numbers become impossible to ignore. At a historical average market return of 7% annually, $500 invested today becomes approximately $1,900 in 20 years. That's not an abstraction. That's the actual cost of the decision, not in today's money, but in the money you'll never see 2 decades from now. Every purchase has a second price tag. Most people never read it. Wealthy people feel this, not as anxiety, as awareness. A quiet, almost automatic consciousness of what they're trading, not just what they're buying. This isn't about spending. Some spending genuinely matters, for health, for connection, for the texture of a life worth living. But there's a specific category of spending that quietly destroys wealth while delivering almost nothing real in return. And that category brings us to the habit that is honestly the hardest one to admit. The third silent habit is the habit of not caring how it looks. This one is uncomfortable because it isn't really about money, it's about identity. Thomas Stanley spent decades interviewing American millionaires, not the ones who appeared wealthy, but the ones who actually were. What he found unsettled a lot of people. The most common car driven by millionaires was a Ford pickup truck. Homes were modest, clothes were unremarkable. By nearly every visible measure, they were indistinguishable from their neighbors, deliberately so. Meanwhile, separate economic research found that visible luxury spending was proportionally highest among lower-income households, not because lower-income people are irresponsible, because status pressure is most intense where financial security is least established. When you feel uncertain about your position, you signal harder. It's not vanity, it's fear wearing an expensive coat. Thorsten Veblen identified this in 1899 and called it conspicuous consumption. 120 years later, it is still one of the most robustly documented behaviors in economics. We spend to signal. We buy things not for what they do, but for what they say. And what they say costs an extraordinary amount of money. Here's the part that's almost cruel. A new luxury car loses 40 to 50% of its value in 5 years, but the psychological reward, the feeling of arrival, the quiet satisfaction of having something that signals success, lasts approximately 2 to 8 weeks before the brain normalizes it completely. Hedonic adaptation, the feeling fades on schedule, the debt does not. And the deepest cost isn't the money, it's the years of wealth building compressed into monthly payments for a story that nobody else is reading as carefully as you think. The silent habit isn't frugality, it's something more radical than that. It's the decision, quiet, personal, almost invisible to everyone around you, to stop spending money on the performance of success and start building the reality of it instead. Those two things are not the same. Most people spend their entire lives not quite noticing the difference. The fourth silent habit is one almost everyone thinks they understand and almost nobody actually practices. It's valuing time, but not the way productivity culture means it. Think about last Sunday evening, not a particular one, any of them. The feeling of a weekend that somehow disappeared. Hours that passed without becoming anything you consciously chose. The mild, sourceless anxiety of Monday arriving before you were ready. That feeling has a name in economics. It's called an opportunity cost, and it's one of the most consistently underestimated financial losses in modern life.
Ashley Willens at Harvard Business School spent years researching the relationship between time, money, and human well-being. Her findings were striking. People who consistently prioritized time over money, who made decisions based on protecting their hours rather than just their accounts, reported higher life satisfaction and, paradoxically, made better long-term financial decisions. The act of genuinely valuing time changes how you relate to money. Because when you truly understand that your hours are finite and non-renewable, when that stops being a philosophical idea and becomes a felt reality, the calculus of every financial decision shifts. The 2-hour commute becomes a cost. The obligation you agreed to without thinking becomes an expense, not metaphorically, measurably, in the alternative value of what those hours could have built. Most people know their hourly rate at work. Almost nobody has calculated what an hour of their personal time is actually worth. And in that gap between what we know professionally and what we ignore personally, enormous amounts of wealth quietly evaporate, not in a single dramatic moment, just Sunday by Sunday. The fifth habit is the strangest one, and it might be the most powerful. What if the most important financial skill has nothing to do with knowledge? Sit with that for a second. Dalbar, a financial research firm that has tracked investor behavior since 1994, publishes an annual study comparing what the market actually returned against what the average investor actually received. The gap is consistent and devastating. Over 20 years, the average equity investor has significantly underperformed a simple index fund, not because they chose bad investments, because they kept moving, buying when optimism peaked, selling when fear arrived, always reacting, never still. The S&P 500 from 1980 to 2020 delivered extraordinary long-term returns, but an investor who missed only the 10 best trading days across that entire 40-year period saw their returns cut nearly in half. And those 10 best days? Most of them occurred within 2 weeks of the worst days. The investors who sold during the panic, who felt the fear and acted on it, missed the recovery entirely. They did something. It cost them everything the patience would have built. Daniel Kahneman spent his career explaining why this keeps happening. The pain of financial loss is neurologically approximately twice as powerful as the pleasure of equivalent gain. The market is designed structurally to feel urgent. Your nervous system is designed evolutionarily to respond. The combination is one of the most expensive psychological traps ever documented. And knowing this doesn't make it easier. That's the part nobody says out loud. You can understand loss aversion completely, read every study, follow every argument, and still feel your hands wanting to move when the portfolio drops, still feel the pull, the almost physical need to do something. The silent habit is the trained ability to feel that pull, fully, honestly, and choose not to move anyway. It doesn't look like anything from the outside. It generates no story worth telling. But across decades, in the silence of not reacting, something extraordinary accumulates, not because of what was done, because of what wasn't. And here is what connects all five. None of them feel significant in the moment. Automating a transfer feels administrative. Pausing before a purchase feels minor. Ignoring what something looks like to other people feels like a small social choice. Protecting a Sunday afternoon feels like preference. Staying still during a market drop feels like fear and discipline and nothing heroic at all. That's the whole point. The habits that quietly change everything are specifically the ones that don't feel like they're changing anything. They don't arrive with weight or ceremony. They don't feel like the turning point. They just accumulate, slowly, invisibly, without drama, while the part of your brain that was waiting for the big moment keeps waiting. The gap between two people who started in exactly the same place isn't created in a single decision. It never is. It's created in what they do and what they choose not to do, in thousands of moments that each felt too small to matter. Those moments were never too small to matter. They were just quiet enough that most people couldn't hear them working.